working on a piece about drugs and the experiential realm, about the substances that human beings use, whose value lies in their altering our consciousness. It seems to be kind of a universal, human universal, that people will use such substances in different places, betel nuts or kava or was amanita mushrooms and vines in the jungle, or the stuff that Johnny Appleseed made possible in the newly settled American Midwest with the hard apple cider. People are always adopting something into their lives that alters experience. And the experience is really has to be understood as this is where it's at. If there were no creature that experienced some things as better and some things as worse, there would be no value in the universe. It's only when you get something mattering to something that anything can matter. Likewise, actually, the idea of the sacred. If there's nothing existing that is experiencing something as sacred, and what can it mean to say there's something sacred? This idea that everything that matters can matter only as it registers in the experiential realm. For creatures for whom there is a better and a worse a kind of experience, that seems to me, it's an idea I keep on coming back to. It feels to me like there's a lot that needs to be mined out of that. Experiences where goodness and not goodness happens. I mean, when you've got a choice, say, between making a kitten purr and torturing it, there is definitely a better and a worse, because the kitten's experience is better and worse. So experience is a big deal. It's where everything's at. It's where good and evil have their reality. It's where beauty and ugliness have their reality. And it's where the use of substances that affect experience can be for better or for worse. I've contemplated the idea that the question, would humankind, I've written it down here, would humankind be better off or worse off if alcoholic beverages had never been available for people to use? On the one hand, there is abundant evidence that alcohol can destroy lives. The misguided movement in America that led to the nation's attempt to deal with alcohol through prohibition had a foundation in the experience that many families were driven to disaster by the abuse of alcohol. On the other hand, there's equally abundant evidence that the use of this drug, which can alter people's consciousness in the direction of greater freedom of emotional experience and expression, is highly valued by many people whose lives and livers are not destroyed by their use. I ponder that question: would humankind be better off if there'd never been any such thing as alcohol? But I don't claim to know the answer. But this kind of question, I'm using this video to work through what I'm striving for here. Weighing the costs and benefits of using a drug that changes a person's experience can be applied more generally to deal with any drug that's taken for its experiential effect. And again, experience is what matters, because nothing can matter except as it registers in the experience of creatures to whom things matter. Sacredness is something that must be experienced. So the substances that alter experience will tend to connect with the sacred. So, for example, it was all around the Mediterranean over the millennia while civilization arose, various civilizations arose there. And as winemaking spread throughout the region, in all these cases, the Egyptian, the Phoenician, the biblical, and many others, it got incorporated into the diversity of the region's religions. This incorporation into religious ritual of substances that alter people's experience, emotionally or perceptually or otherwise, occurs almost everywhere, because it seems that using available drugs to alter consciousness is practically a universal, a human universal. The ancient Hindu texts refer to some sacred drug called soma, whose identity remains uncertain. The shamans of hunting-gathering bands in Siberia use mind-altering mushrooms as a central part of their religious life. Some peoples in the Americas employed ayahuasca in their ritual life, made from jungle vines, while others built religious ceremonies around the consumption of the peyote, the seeds of a cactus. And lately, archaeologists have found residues of marijuana in temple vessels of the Hebrews. This widespread incorporation of experience-altering substances into religious rituals of various peoples tells us two things. First, that people intuitively understood that it is in the realm of our experience that what's important happens. And second, that the use of sacred materials needs to be governed by rules that respect their sacredness. Which brings us back to the idea of wise use. Gee, did I introduce the idea of wise use? I meant to have introduced the idea of wise use. Okay. Well, I think it's time to announce the name. The challenge of using such substances wisely can even pertain to a drug like caffeine. Although caffeine, unlike, for example, alcohol, does not destroy lives, it is not insignificant. Not only is it used daily through coffee, tea, and other drinks by over 2 billion people, but its use has driven some major historical developments, according to some historians, like feeding the Enlightenment in Western thought, and helping to bring about the American and French revolutions. And he also talks about empowering capitalism through the coffee break. It is no small thing to make people feel more energetic, attentive, focused. I've felt compelled to seek the wise use of caffeine. The questions, as they generally are for such drugs, are how much, how often, in what circumstances, and for what purpose. My purpose is clear. Caffeine helps me to pursue my calling better by 1, increasing my interest in the world, and 2, making me eager to write or talk about what I find interesting. But I've discovered that if I use it daily, I lose much of the magic I value most in the caffeine. As an addictive drug, caffeine is one that one can develop a tolerance for, getting less and less out of more and more. Wise use for me, I've decided, is to have about 50 milligrams of caffeine, about a half a cup of coffee, 3 days out of 4. With the no caffeine day, the one just before the day I want to perform at my best. After I take even that 1 day break, I can again gain some of that special quality of experience this drug has to offer. Of course, in contemporary society, there are a number of other substances available to people, either legally or not, more or less safe or dangerous, that impact the nature of experience. Most people are left to having to figure out matters of use or no use, wise use or foolish use for themselves, because society doesn't provide us a sufficient set of cultural rituals and norms. And this is a moment when Western civilization, especially the United States, is becoming more open to the use of such substances for spiritually meaningful purposes. And I have 2 bullet points here. The marijuana that used to be demonized into reefer madness has now become as acceptable a path of changing consciousness as alcohol has long been. To be loosened up by alcohol or energized by caffeine, people can now legally use marijuana to loosen how they perceive and understand the world around them. And psychedelics, which can take people into meaningful spiritual experiences, are increasingly being considered as means to achieve good things, like using magic mushrooms to help people come to terms with their dying, or using MDMA, ecstasy, to help heal people from their traumatic injuries. Some of the use is ritualized into places of healing. Some use is people doing it on their own and having to manage their own voyage into a different kind of experience, practicing wise use. For wise use remains the challenge with all these things, how to maximize the beneficial consequences while minimizing any damage. So, thinking about these things, that we are at a historically interesting point where things are opening up. I saw an article, I think it's in the Yale Review right now, about this being, in a sense, the second coming of the psychedelic revolution. I think it's partly about how in the 1950s it was actually kind of promising that the culture would bring psychedelics into playing a constructive role. The article, I think, blames the hippies and Timothy Leary for spoiling everything. I don't know. I experienced America as being very uptight about certain aspects of consciousness. And I don't think it was Timothy Leary and the hippies that made a war on drugs a politically appropriate seeming response for politicians to use to deal with these other substances. So now we have marijuana that used to be treated by people who had cocktails in the evening, like evil incarnate, the gateway drug, et cetera, et cetera. Alcohol's clearly the more dangerous drug, but it wasn't the hippies. It is hard for a society to deal with the sacred. Drugs are always a challenge. You know, all those families that were destroyed by alcohol in 19th century, late 19th century America, by demon rum, in gin joints and stuff like that. All these women and the women Christian Temperance Union. That was a social manifestation of a failure of the society as a whole to practice wise use. Our society tends to consume things in ways that are kind of thoughtless and reckless. Tobacco, for example. I don't know much from the inside about nicotine, but I have experimented with it enough to and studied it enough to know that nicotine is not nothing. To the Indians, it was a sacred thing that was used in a in sacred ritualized way, like in a peace pipe. Not that I know the anthropology all that well, but I think I know that much. And then in American society, it becomes this thing that you have millions of chain smokers. I don't know if the Native Americans ever had a problem dealing with nicotine, which is apparently a very addictive substance. I've never heard of there being an addiction problem in Native American societies with respect to nicotine. Anyway, America needs to take very seriously the challenge of wise use. We've abused alcohol enough that, I hear a lot about people using alcohol in their lives in a way which is very destructive. I think we got a problem with alcohol. I'm not in favor of prohibition, but I am in favor of asking, how you generate a culture that uses it wisely. It seems to me that French and Jewish cultures that utilized wine in their social and cultural rituals did better with it. Though I gather liver disease in France was maybe is widespread. There are some prices that are worth paying for some things, and I don't know who uses alcohol wisely. I have virtually no relationship with alcohol myself because it gives me a headache, but I have had some good times. I really understand the appeal of it because, if it weren't for the headaches I get almost instantaneously, I would be happy to go down that path once in a while. But here we're at a time when, thanks to people like Michael Pollan, who wrote this wonderful book, How to Change Our Minds. I think it was like 2017. And he's sort of announcing the second coming of the psychedelic revolution. But there are lots of ways of blowing it. It is at least a cultural challenge we should take on to see to it that as some of these new things come, they really are used wisely. Whatever that takes. Some of it, part of it is, like with the use of ecstasy to help heal trauma. People are talking about setting up clinics for this purpose, having psychotherapeutic professionals facilitating something, which is, basically, it's sort of the equivalent for our society of a spiritual healing ritual that other societies have utilized drugs for. So that's one place where we can go, but we have to figure out how to get there. How do we make it so that people choose ways of using these substances in ways that advance the human good, And a lot of this new stuff does have to do with the spiritual dimension. Uh, in particular, the psychedelics um, are gateways into experiences that can be spiritually transformative. Spiritually transformative experiences can come in a variety of ways. They can come out of life with no substances added, but clearly they can also be facilitated by the wise use of substances. Cultures around the world have recognized that a lot of things took them in a direction which they experienced as having spiritual significance, even though it might be very different, whether it was Dionysian with alcohol or what the weird place that seems that those poisonous mushrooms in India and up through into Siberia used. I mean, there's all kinds of places, and people almost always interpreted them as being spiritually significant. Part of the task in life and for a civilization is to gain spiritual wisdom collectively, if possible, and each of us individually, and make that wholeness be a force in helping the world become more whole. So part of the challenge that we face as we as a society bring these new drugs into our society. I mean, they've been there illegally, for a long time. But now to have it sort of be incorporated without warfare into the American civilization, that the force that's whatever the value is, the effects of marijuana are in this realm that it touches by altering our consciousness as molecules attached to our cannabinoid receptors. That whole transformation of the thinking process in certain ways that have to do with that cannabis, the system that is built into our bodies and our brains that somehow this particular drug is able to connect with. That shows us just the stereoscopic aspect of experience. Mind alteration is powerful spiritually because once you've seen things from this place and you've seen things from that place, you've got a whole different sense of there are different ways of seeing this thing. And the world becomes much bigger. And that has spiritual significance. But Rabbi, how can they both be right? Well, you're right too. It is bigger than what we see in our daily life with our usual form of consciousness. My own experience is that I would long have articulated, for a long period of time, would have articulated the effects of marijuana as habits of thought cease to govern so tightly, and new ways of thinking and perceiving become possible. I've characterized my own mind, which is what was trained and motivated and stuff, to become what I described as sort of a tightly coopered barrel. And I found that it was possible to use substances to loosen that cooperage and make it possible to see a lot deeper into things. spiritually transformative experiences are something to seek out. I have limited courage at this point in my life about how open I will allow myself be to the impactful experiences that have changed the course of my life. Kind of shock absorbers are kind of worn out after as many miles as I've put in on as many bumpy roads. I don't have the courage to take some things on. But it has remained true that I have taken on the challenge in a very serious way of how can I use some of these things that impact our consciousness in a way that fortifies my fulfillment, my sense of understanding reality, my ability to see what should be done. It's not a small challenge, and we in America need at least to take it on collectively. How do we incorporate these things into our lives, like we have with tobacco and coffee and alcohol and tea and now marijuana and some psychedelics. So let us use this as an opportunity to create a kind of wholeness that we don't always reliably create. At least take on the job, identify the task of, asking as a society, what are good ways of using marijuana? What does healthy marijuana use look like? And what does problematic marijuana use look like? I actually don't think that it's hugely destructive, not nearly so much as alcohol, but not every form of use is wise. There is in the drug culture. I've read on Erowid.com when I wanted to understand what was known about this or about that. They had all kinds of the huge directory of mind-altering plants and chemicals and stuff like that, and stories that people told about their use. And one of the things that was visible there was from those stories was that there was a whole lot of recklessness. I mean, people were just groping. I mean, I felt sad reading a lot of those stories, the way they would recklessly combine this potent thing with that potent thing without a whole lot of thought. There's the idea about set and setting. There was not a lot of intentionality. It was a lot of people who seemed to be lost were seeking to get far out experiences in order to cope with, I'm not sure what. But it was not like an organic process of trying to use these things wisely. There wasn't a sense of a destination other than, having some kind of exciting adventure. So I think that there's a lot of benefit we could get if the culture started looking at what kinds of mistakes and what they look like, and what kinds of really wonderful things get facilitated by one thing or another. What does it look like when alcohol is being properly used in a group, and what does it, not the barroom brawl, you want to see a bunch of people being really convivial and enjoying each other, not the barroom brawl. It's interesting, isn't it, the way we incorporate certain things into our culture. The barroom brawl is sort of embraced by a part of our culture, come to think of it. I'm not sure what to make of it. There's a place for conflict in America. For some people, the conflicts that alcohol can create are a feature and not a bug. When a drug opens the gates to some, untapped kinds of possibilities, what comes out can be kind of either whole or broken. It is a challenge to use what any given drug has to offer in a way that makes a person more whole. That sums it up. My wife's use of alcohol is that the 3 weekend evenings of the week, she is entitled to a glass of white wine, which she drinks with great pleasure, very slowly, while she reads something that she's loving to read. I think it's lovely. I wouldn't have her give that up. We need to, I have felt sometimes when I was teaching at a private school in New Mexico, and some kids who are students at this highly rated private school got into trouble with alcohol, and we in the faculty were asked to support a very no tolerance, punitive way of dealing with the whole alcohol question and with the student body. I wrote back that I thought that the most constructive thing that we could do as a school, we are playing a role in the lives of these people who are just moving into the time when alcohol will become a part of their lives. A lot of alcohol gets consumed at the college level, and a lot of college students get very deep into alcohol. So I think that I wrote back, I said, I think that we should be dealing with this as a teachable moment, and to do what's possible to teach these young people how to approach their approaching responsibilities about alcohol. How when that does become a part of their lives, which society has deemed not appropriate before the age of 18, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's not the alcohol that is wrong. It is the question of whether you're going to be able to use it wisely as something which enhances the quality of your life and is not destructive. So here is the counsel to take into that future. That wasn't what they put out, but that is what I believe. That America has difficulty bringing wholeness to many of the areas of our consciousness. We get confused about a lot of things. We got a lot of people who believe things that are patently false. We got problems, and it's not surprising that people who are living in a culture in which a lot of things are kind of broken going to be challenged to how to deal with something which can have a powerful force that leads into spiritual realms that can change the course of lives. What's impactful needs to also be constructive in its nature and received in a constructive, wholeness building way. So there are known risks proceeding into those realms, and people need to understand the implications of taking those risks. And so wise use includes, for example, you start with a smaller quantity than you think is required for the effects that you are seeking. You can't take less than what you just took. So it is always important to manage the force that's going to be unleashed to achieve a useful purpose. If you want to be overwhelmed, you can take that risk, but it is a risk. So use for good purposes using strategies that have been arrived at as thoughtfully as possible. That's wise use. America needs to figure out what wise use looks like, convey it as widely as possible, and be as helpful as possible to making these sacred substances assets in the life of our culture and our society. Thank you.